The Watership Down podcast is intended for listeners who are familiar with the plot. There will be spoilers. This episode is scripted, narrated, recorded and edited by Newell Fisher. Hello, and welcome to the Watership Down podcast episode 186, in which we will be looking at the fourth 10-minute segment of the third episode of the 2018 Netflix version of Watership Down. First of all, though, Owsla member Sean Higgins has been in touch with a correction and an observation. Sean is easily the authority on the 1984 Australian Broadcasting Corporation radio play of Watership Down, and last week I stated that the elaboration of Owsla ranks began in the F-RAFA of that version. In fact, as Sean has pointed out, the main elaboration on rank titles in that version was actually in the Sandalford Owsla. I'm happy to correct this. Secondly, Sean pointed out that there was a reference to losing 5 Owsla members in last week's segment. This steps away from the convention in the book where any number over 4 was referred to as Hrare or lots. Considering the other uses of lapine in this miniseries, couldn't they have tried a bit harder? Anyway, let's get back to F-RAFA and the River Test, where some urgent planning is needed after last week's thwarted escape. Netflix miniseries Episode 3, Part 4, Approaching Thunder. Part 4 of Episode 3, The Escape, runs from 29 minutes 05 to 40 minutes 05, and the reverse timings are 21 minutes to 10 minutes exactly. The equivalent chapters from the book are chapters 33, The Great River, 36, Approaching Thunder, 37, The Thunder Builds Up, and 38, The Thunder Breaks. We are at the bridge that has come to be known as Key-Har Bridge after he attacked the Efrafans there in the 1978 film. It is night time. In a hedgerow next to the bridge, Hazel is explaining the plan. While Key-Har deals with the Efrafans, it will be their job to help the does get as far away as they can. Hawkbit points out their current seagull deficiency, adding that this is after they'd fed and helped him. Hazel suggests Key-Har may have forgotten when he was meant to show up. Hawkbit riposts by suggesting that he might just be an unreliable knave. Now that is a word no longer in common usage in the UK, but it is a good one. If I were able to contribute to this meeting, I would also feel the need to point out the lack of any effective means of getting as far away as possible. But I'm sure they will find the punt soon. Blackberry adds that they cannot wait here much longer, and without Key-Har they have no means of getting away. Hazel tries to be optimistic, pointing out how Blackberry and his companions got out of F-RAFA without Key-Har. This is a very weak argument. Blackberry's attempt to interrupt provokes an angry response from this love-struck Hazel as he shouts that he is not leaving without her, meaning Clover. He had already left one love behind at Sandalford, Dewdrop, and despite Fiver telling him she had betrayed them to the Owsla there, this trauma is still affecting his judgment. I've said it before. I prefer the Hazel who thinks with his head rather than anything else. His angry outburst is followed up with a rather pitiful please. After an awkward pause, Blackberry suggests at least going back to the river, further away from F-RAFA. As they leave the hedgerow, Hazel looks up sadly at the full moon. And now it is Ni Frith, or noon, on the following day. We see the sun framed by the inside of one of the chimneys of F-RAFA. The camera shots pan down to the base of the chimney shaft, a bare, sandy space exposed to the elements, littered with sleeping and exhausted-looking rabbits. These are the so-called deep burrows. Clover, who has somehow managed to communicate with Bigwig, approaches Hyzenthley and tells her that Bigwig thinks there might be a spy among them. Hyzenthley refuses to believe this, saying that they are all her sisters, her family, and this is definitely meant in the sense of comradeship. Another doe, who I think is the Thuthinang, says that there are only 2 guards at night, which might give some of them a chance to get out if they rush them. But another doe, who I think is Nettle, points out that they will still have to get through the guards on each mark entrance. Her pointing out problems with an escape is significant. Clover adds they have to do something. Hyzenthley says to stop. Her stay of execution ends that day. She asks them to promise her that they will stop fighting. She then repeats the saying about hoping the winds will stop blowing that Captain Orkis fed her in their recent meeting. This Heisenthal has despaired and is resigned to her death. Clover tells her not to give up. There is still hope. They are interrupted by Sergeant Sainfoin, who tells Heisenthal Captain Orkis wants to see her. As she leaves, she admonishes Clover for her hope. In Efrafa, hope is always your enemy. As Heisenthal is led away by Ausler, Sainfoin addresses the other does, telling them that it has come to his attention that there has been singing. Anyone caught doing this will be punished. A doe collapses. This may be Nettle. The Thuthanang goes up to her and says it's the heat. The collapsed doe asks what they would do without Heisenthal's leadership. Without her they are done for. More doom. Clover immediately goes to the entrance and says she needs to see Woundwort. When the sentry says no, she points out she is the hutch rabbit with the general's ear. This is sufficient, and she gets to leave. The Thuthanang asks the collapsed doe what they will do about Heisenthal. Without her they will lose any hope of escape. Clover arrives at Woundwort's quarters. She says she has come to make a deal. She will consider being his queen if he lets Heisenthal live. Laughing cruelly, Woundwort tells her she has misunderstood the situation. He does not make deals. Backing her up to the entrance in the floor through which she eventually falls, he makes it clear she either becomes his queen or lives out her days in the deep burrows. He does not care which. The rabbits of Watership Down are sheltering under a wooden bridge while they decide what to do. Hawkbit points out that without Kihar they have no plan. They will be followed to the river by the Afrifans and killed. Fiver says he will talk to Hazel, who is lying out in the open a little way away. He isn't feeling too good. Hazel says he never thanked Fiver for helping them find him. Fiver responds that it was his visions that also got Hazel shot. And this is a feature of his visions in this version of Watership Down. They can be so haphazard as to be capable of causing as much harm as good. And we are about to be treated to another fine example of this. But just then, Blackberry spots something. A small flat-bottomed boat tied up by the side of the river. Oh, hold on. That's what happened in the original story. In this version, something else happens instead. Fiver hears a car horn nearby. He sees a red car driving along the other side of the river. And suddenly, he is in the other world. He sees that same car driving by in the dark, and he is inside it, looking out of one of the rear windows. As the rabbits cross the bridge, Blackberry questions Fiver, who says they will need a getaway plan. There is something about that red hrududu that means they will be safe. And, spoiler alert, Fiver is kind of right about that red hrududu. But not yet. Not by a long shot. And so the 5 rabbits, Fiver, Bluebell, Hawkbit, Dandelion and Blackberry, arrive in the town of Overton. They immediately have to dodge behind a wall as a human passes, before then making their way along a pavement in full view of passing traffic. Ahead of them, we hear the bell of a railroad crossing. Not a level crossing as you would find in the UK. A North American railroad crossing. Because as far as I'm aware, no UK level crossing makes a sound like that. This further reinforces the impression that this version of Watership Down has been transplanted to the more open countryside of parts of North America. So when cars leave this version of Overton, do they have to switch to the right-hand side of the road? Yes, I'm being sarcastic, but this whole section of this version of Watership Down very much deserves it. So, as the traffic stops for the approaching train, the rabbits shelter under a bench they come to by the sidewalk. Sorry, pavement. And the red car stops right by them. As it revs its engine, Fiver sniffs, and his vision of the other world momentarily returns. As we hear the passing train use a North American-style horn as it passes, Fiver moves forward towards the hrududu and begins sniffing at its rear tyre. He moves further into the road as the other rabbits wonder what he is up to. Fiver comes to a stop at the other side of the hrududu, right in the path of the tyres of the Land Rover behind. Sniffing the other tyre, he realises something isn't right. They need to go back. He can say that again. And then the railroad crossing bell goes off again. Fiver is starting to panic now. The barrier lifts. Dandelion rushes forward and just about saves Fiver from being crushed under the Land Rover's wheels. They then find themselves in oncoming traffic from the other direction. Eventually making it to the opposite pavement, Dandelion and Fiver dodge through traffic to get back to the bench. As they regather under the bench, we see clearly and very touchingly that the plaque on the bench reads, "In loving memory of Richard Adams." Hawkbit tells Fiver to keep his visions to himself from now on, and you can't blame him really. They depart under the bench. Back in Ephrafa, Hyzenthley meets with Orkis, who asks if she has thought about what he said. Hyzenthley says she can work with him, but conditions for the does would need to improve. He asks her to confirm she'll tell him everything, but there is no time for her to answer. He orders her removed. She is to be executed at Frith Down or sunset. He already has all the spies he needs. This was just a sadistic exercise to see if he could break her on the orders of Woundwort, and he has succeeded in doing so. It is a perfect moment showing what tyranny does to its victims. Captain Orkis is an impressive creation for this Ephrafa, more Vervain than Vervain himself, who is just a thug in this version. Orkis, on the other hand, is a calculating, sadistic psychopath. And there is more to come. As Hyzenthley is led away, she sees Nettle having a conversation with two Owsla. She is a spy. The incautious Nell Filter of the book, who only gave information under torture, has been replaced by this willing traitor. A group of Owsla are enjoying a story. The storyteller has just reached the end of The King's Lettuce, it seems, though with a flourish that bigs up the Ephrafa and Owsla's raiding prowess. Bigwig arrives, and one of them asks him to tell a story. Sainfoyd has told them this is his skill. Reluctantly, Thlaily begins, though it is very clear he is not actually gifted in this area. He is saved by the arrival of Orkis. Or not. On being told Thlaily was about to tell a story, Orkis turns on him, urging him to continue and pretending to listen attentively. But as soon as Bigwig starts, mentioning Alakara needing a trick, Orkis interrupts him, asking if he can tell the story of how he was tricked by the does the previous night. Orkis says it was just a joke, but no one is laughing. He urges Bigwig to continue, then changes his mind. He wants to hear the story of how Thlaily led a homba or fox onto Captain Campion's scouting group, as he calls it, which resulted in 3 deaths. There is no point in denying it. Bigwig says it was an accident. Orkis says Bigwig is from the other warren. He is circling him now. Bigwig asks which warren. Orkis says the one Holly came from, the one that killed his brother. He signals one of the Owsla over to Bigwig. Bigwig says his warren was destroyed by men. The Owsla member strikes Bigwig across the face. Orkis tells him to do it again. He asks what Bigwig knows about the other warren. Bigwig repeats his answer. They stare each other out. Orkis tells Thlaily he has a Yona's mile to go before he will trust him, but he knows how he can start. Bigwig is left to contemplate what this might mean. Comparison with the book. The beginning of this segment is rather like the abandoned escape attempt of the book, although the circumstances in Ephrafa are very different. And there is no Kehar to report back to the group. They have not got a clue what is happening. And this theme extends to the imprisoned does, who have little communication with Bigwig, nor any idea as to how to move forward. The rabbits of Watership Down by the river have no inkling of a plan as to how to get away, though to be fair, in the book, there is also no escape plan until they reach the river Test. Fiver's bizarre dream quest into the middle of a queue of traffic replaces the finding of the punt. There will be more on this next week, believe me. As for Orkis, he proves very good at his job, that job being to spread despair and demoralisation among those who would escape Ephrafa, and his sarcastic interrogation of Bigwig effectively takes the place here of Woundwort's questioning of Bigwig in the book that foiled the initial escape attempt. We truly have reached the low point of the story in 2 senses. Firstly, in terms of the fortunes of the rabbits of Watership Down, but also in this version of the story's willingness to stray away from the original book. You have to ask the question at this point, was this version of Watership Down even made for fans of the original story? And if it was not, then what, honestly, was the point? Next time, all seems lost, before the escape from Ephrafa begins at last. But it's not the escape the fans of the book will remember.